story. Part 1. Elena Petrov stood in the cold Moscow morning, watching male cadets march past the aviation academy gates. At 19, she had dreamed of flying since childhood, but the recruitment officer's words still echoed in her mind from the day before. Young lady, women belong in factories and hospitals, not in fighter planes. This is man's work. She clutched the rejection letter tightly, feeling the sting of disappointment mixed with burning determination. Elena had grown up on her grandfather's stories of the Great War, watching him trace flight patterns in the air with weathered hands. She knew every model of aircraft by heart, could identify engine sounds from miles away, and had built model planes since she was 7 years old. The year was 1940, and war clouds were gathering across Europe. While most women her age were learning domestic skills, Elena had been secretly taking flying lessons at a small airfield outside the city. Her instructor, Victor, was an old war veteran who saw something special in her natural ability to handle aircraft. He taught her everything about aerodynamics, navigation, and combat maneuvers, though he never imagined she would need such skills in actual battle. Elena's family lived in a small apartment where her mother worked as a seamstress and her father served as a railway engineer. They supported her unusual dreams but worried about the dangerous path she wanted to follow. Her younger brother, Mikhail, looked up to her courage, often saying she was braver than any of his male friends. The neighbors, however, whispered about the strange girl who spent more time reading aviation manuals than learning to cook. That evening, Elena sat by her window, staring at the stars and imagining herself soaring among them. She made a silent promise to herself that no amount of rejection would stop her from becoming a pilot. She began writing letters to every aviation commander she could find, explaining her skills and determination. Most never replied, but she kept writing, knowing that somewhere, someone would give her a chance. The local newspaper had recently published stories about the war expanding, and Elena noticed that many young men were being recruited for military service. She wondered if the desperate need for pilots might eventually open doors that had always been closed to women. Little did she know that history was about to create an opportunity that would change not just her life, but the entire course of aerial warfare. Elena spent her evenings studying military tactics and aircraft specifications, preparing herself for a chance that might never come. She practiced physical exercises to build strength and endurance, knowing that flying combat missions would demand everything she had. Her determination grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by every person who told her she was chasing an impossible dream. As winter settled over Moscow, Elena continued her secret flight training whenever possible. Victor had begun teaching her more advanced maneuvers, impressed by her quick learning and steady nerves under pressure. He often remarked that she had better instincts than many male pilots he had trained over the years. These skills would soon prove more valuable than anyone could have imagined. The rejection from the aviation academy was just the beginning of Elena's journey. She refused to accept that her gender should determine her future, especially when her country might soon need every capable pilot available. Her story was about to become part of a larger movement that would challenge everything people believed about women in warfare. Elena's determination represented something much bigger than one young woman's dream of flying. She was about to become part of a revolutionary moment in military history, though she didn't know it yet. Her persistence in the face of constant rejection was preparing her for challenges that would test not just her flying abilities, but her courage in ways she never imagined possible. Story Part 1. Elena Petrov stood in the cold Moscow morning, watching male cadets march past the aviation academy gates. At 19, she had dreamed of flying since childhood, but the recruitment officer's words still echoed in her mind from the day before. Young lady, women belong in factories and hospitals, not in fighter planes. This is man's work. She clutched the rejection letter tightly, feeling the sting of disappointment mixed with burning determination. Elena had grown up on her grandfather's stories of the Great War, watching him trace flight patterns in the air with weathered hands. She knew every model of aircraft by heart, could identify engine sounds from miles away, and had built model planes since she was 7 years old. The year was 1940, and war clouds were gathering across Europe. While most women her age were learning domestic skills, Elena had been secretly taking flying lessons at a small airfield outside the city. Her instructor, Victor, was an old war veteran who saw something special in her natural ability to handle aircraft. He taught her everything about aerodynamics, navigation, and combat maneuvers, though he never imagined she would need such skills in actual battle. Elena's family lived in a small apartment where her mother worked as a seamstress and her father served as a railway engineer. They supported her unusual dreams but worried about the dangerous path she wanted to follow. Her younger brother Mikhail looked up to her courage, often saying she was braver than any of his male friends. The neighbors, however, whispered about the strange girl who spent more time reading aviation manuals than learning to cook. That evening, Elena sat by her window staring at the stars and imagining herself soaring among them. She made a silent promise to herself that no amount of rejection would stop her from becoming a pilot. She began writing letters to every aviation commander she could find, explaining her skills and determination. Most never replied, but she kept writing, knowing that somewhere, someone would give her a chance. The local newspaper had recently published stories about the war expanding, and Elena noticed that many young men were being recruited for military service. She wondered if the desperate need for pilots might eventually open doors that had always been closed to women. Little did she know that history was about to create an opportunity that would change not just her life, but the entire course of aerial warfare. Elena spent her evenings studying military tactics and aircraft specifications, preparing herself for a chance that might never come. She practiced physical exercises to build strength and endurance, knowing that flying combat missions would demand everything she had. Her determination grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by every person who told her she was chasing an impossible dream. As winter settled over Moscow, Elena continued her secret flight training whenever possible. Victor had begun teaching her more advanced maneuvers, impressed by her quick learning and steady nerves under pressure. He often remarked that she had better instincts than many male pilots he had trained over the years. These skills would soon prove more valuable than anyone could have imagined. The rejection from the Aviation Academy was just the beginning of Elena's journey. She refused to accept that her gender should determine her future, especially when her country might soon need every capable pilot available. Her story was about to become part of a larger movement that would challenge everything people believed about women in warfare. Elena's determination represented something much bigger than one young woman's dream of flying. She was about to become part of a revolutionary moment in military history, though she didn't know it yet. Her persistence in the face of constant rejection was preparing her for challenges that would test not just her flying abilities, but her courage in ways she never imagined possible. Story Part 3. Elena's first combat mission was a night bombing run deep into German-occupied territory. Flying her Polikarpov Po-2 biplane through the darkness, she felt every vibration of the small aircraft as anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky around her. The plane was so quiet that German soldiers nicknamed the female pilots night witches, because they could glide silently toward targets with their engines cut, appearing like ghosts in the darkness. The mission required precision, flying at extremely low altitudes to avoid radar detection. Elena and her squadron mates had to navigate by starlight and memory, dropping their bombs on supply depots and communication centers. The wooden aircraft offered little protection against enemy fire, and every mission felt like a dance with death. Yet Elena discovered she possessed a natural calm under fire that surprised even her instructors. Over the following months, Elena flew mission after mission, gradually building a reputation as one of the most skilled pilots in her regiment. She learned to read weather patterns, enemy searchlight movements, and the subtle signs that indicated danger ahead. Her fellow pilots began to trust her judgment completely, often following her lead during complex nighttime formations. The bonds between the women grew stronger with each successful mission they completed together. The German forces soon realized they were facing something unprecedented. Intelligence reports described highly effective female pilots conducting precise strikes with remarkable consistency. Enemy propaganda initially mocked the idea of women in combat, but their tune changed as the night witches began inflicting serious damage on German positions. The psychological effect was significant, as German soldiers struggled to accept that women were outmaneuvering their experienced male pilots. Elena's skills caught the attention of higher command when she successfully completed a particularly dangerous mission to destroy a heavily defended ammunition depot. Flying through intense anti-aircraft fire, she managed to place her bombs with surgical precision while helping guide other aircraft safely through the enemy defenses. Her calm leadership under extreme pressure marked her as someone destined for greater responsibilities. The physical demands of constant combat flying began taking their toll on all the pilots. Elena lost weight and developed dark circles under her eyes, but her determination never wavered. She wrote regular letters to her family, though censorship meant she could share few details about her actual experiences. Her mother worried constantly, while her father expressed quiet pride in his daughter's service to their country. As winter approached, Elena's regiment received orders to prepare for a major offensive operation. Intelligence indicated that German forces were planning a significant push toward Moscow, and Soviet air power would be crucial in stopping the advance. Elena and her fellow night witches would play a vital role in disrupting enemy supply lines and communication networks behind the front lines. The missions became increasingly dangerous. As German air defenses improved and more experienced, fighter pilots were assigned to counter Soviet air attacks. Elena witnessed several of her closest friends shot down during combat missions, losses that affected the entire squadron deeply. Each death served as a reminder of how fragile life was in aerial warfare, but also strengthened their resolve to honor fallen comrades through continued success. Elena began demonstrating exceptional leadership qualities, often volunteering for the most dangerous assignments and helping newer pilots develop their combat skills. Her natural ability to remain calm under pressure made her someone others looked to for guidance during difficult moments. Squadron commanders started consulting her about mission planning and tactical decisions. By the spring of 1942, Elena had completed over 100 combat missions, earning recognition as one of the most effective pilots in her regiment. Her success helped prove that women could excel in aerial combat roles previously reserved for men. The Night Witches had become legendary among both Soviet and German forces, demonstrating courage and skill that challenged traditional assumptions about women in warfare. Elena's growing reputation was about to bring her new opportunities and responsibilities that would test her abilities in ways she never imagined. Her journey from rejected aviation academy applicant to respected combat pilot was inspiring other women throughout the Soviet Union. She was becoming a symbol of what determination and skill could accomplish, regardless of gender barriers that others considered insurmountable. Story Part 4. The call came on a gray morning in late spring 1943. Elena was summoned to headquarters where a stern-faced general explained that she was being transferred to a fighter regiment. The Soviet Air Force was planning the largest aerial offensive in history, and they needed their most experienced pilots leading formations of fighters against German air superiority. Elena felt her heart racing as she realized the magnitude of what was being asked of her. The transition from night bombing to fighter piloting represented an enormous challenge. Elena would now be flying the faster, more powerful Yak-1 fighter aircraft in daylight combat against experienced German pilots. Fighter combat required split-second decisions, aggressive maneuvering, and the ability to engage enemy aircraft in deadly duels high above the battlefield. Many questioned whether a woman could handle the intense physical and mental demands of fighter piloting. Elena's new squadron was composed entirely of male pilots who had been fighting for years. Their initial reaction to having a female pilot join their ranks ranged from skepticism to outright hostility. Some argued that fighter combat was fundamentally different from bombing missions, requiring masculine aggression and physical strength that women simply didn't possess. Elena knew she would have to prove herself all over again in this new environment. The training for fighter combat was unlike anything Elena had experienced. She learned advanced aerial maneuvers, dogfighting techniques, and formation tactics used in large-scale air battles. The physical demands were enormous, as high-speed turns and dives created gravitational forces that tested human endurance limits. Elena pushed herself harder than ever, determined to master every aspect of fighter piloting. Her first fighter mission was a patrol flight over German-occupied territory. Flying in formation with 3 male pilots, Elena felt the difference immediately. The fighter aircraft responded to her controls with incredible sensitivity, and the speed was intoxicating. When they encountered a formation of German fighters, Elena experienced her first air-to-air combat, engaging in a deadly dance of maneuvers and gunfire that lasted only minutes but felt like hours. Elena's natural flying instincts translated well to fighter combat. She discovered she possessed excellent spatial awareness and could anticipate enemy movements with remarkable accuracy. During her third fighter mission, she shot down her first German aircraft, a Messerschmitt Bf-109 that had been attacking a Soviet bomber formation. The victory earned grudging respect from her male squadron mates, who began to see her as a capable warrior rather than an unwelcome experiment. As Elena's fighter experience grew, military planners were developing strategies for a massive summer offensive. Intelligence indicated that German forces were preparing their own large-scale attack, and the resulting air battles would determine control of the skies over the Eastern Front. Elena learned that she was being considered for a leadership role in what would become the largest air battle in history. The preparation for the upcoming offensive involved intensive training in large formation flying and coordinated attack tactics. Elena worked with dozens of other pilots, practicing the complex maneuvers that would be necessary when hundreds of aircraft engaged simultaneously. Her experience and proven combat record made her a natural choice to lead formations of newer, less experienced pilots into battle. Elena's reputation had spread throughout the Soviet Air Force. Stories of the former Night Witch who had successfully transitioned to fighter combat inspired other female pilots and challenged traditional thinking about women's roles in warfare. Military newspapers featured articles about her accomplishments, though she remained focused on the tactical preparations for the coming battle, rather than her growing fame. The intelligence briefings painted a sobering picture of what lay ahead. German air strength was concentrated for a massive offensive that would involve thousands of aircraft on both sides. The battle would likely determine the outcome of the entire war on the Eastern Front. Elena realized that she was about to participate in a historic moment that would test everything she had learned about aerial combat. As summer approached, Elena received official notification that she would command a formation of fighters during the opening phase of the offensive. She would be responsible for leading nearly 100 aircraft into combat against experienced German pilots flying superior aircraft. The weight of this responsibility was enormous, but Elena felt ready for the challenge that would define her legacy as a combat pilot. Elena spent her final weeks of preparation studying German fighter tactics, reviewing intelligence reports about enemy capabilities, and working closely with the pilots who would follow her into battle. She knew that many of these young men were looking to her for leadership and guidance, and she was determined not to let them down when the moment of truth arrived. Story Part 5. The morning of July 5, 1943, dawned clear and hot over the Kursk region. Elena stood beside her Yak-1 fighter, as ground crews completed final preparations for what would become the largest air battle in human history. Nearly 2,000 aircraft from both sides would clash in the skies above the Eastern Front, and Elena would lead the opening formation of 100 Soviet fighters directly into the heart of the German attack. Elena's hands remained steady as she reviewed her mission briefings one final time. Intelligence reports indicated that German forces were launching Operation Citadel, their last major offensive on the Eastern Front. The Luftwaffe had concentrated their most experienced pilots and best aircraft for this crucial battle. Elena knew that the outcome of today's fighting could determine the entire course of the war. As Elena climbed into her fighter's cockpit, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the rejected Aviation Academy application to becoming a night witch, and now preparing to lead fighters in the most important air battle of the war, her path had been extraordinary. The other pilots in her formation looked to her with confidence, trusting her experience and judgment to guide them through the coming combat. The radio crackled with reports of massive German formations approaching from the west. Elena could see the first enemy aircraft appearing as distant specks on the horizon, growing larger and more numerous by the minute. She estimated at least 300 German fighters and bombers approaching their sector, far more than intelligence had predicted. The odds were daunting, but Elena felt a familiar calm settling over her as combat approached. Elena's formation took off in perfect coordination, 99 other fighters following her lead as they climbed toward the approaching German armada. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, hundreds of aircraft maneuvering in complex patterns against the bright summer sky. Elena knew that within minutes, this organized formation would dissolve into dozens of individual dogfights scattered across miles of sky. The first contact came at 15,000 feet, when German Messerschmitt fighters dove down from above. attempting to break up the Soviet formation before it could reach the German bombers. Elena immediately turned into the attack, her formation following her movements as they engaged the enemy fighters. The sky exploded into chaos as aircraft from both sides maneuvered desperately to gain advantage over their opponents. Elena found herself locked in combat with an experienced German pilot flying a Focke-Wulf 190, one of Germany's most advanced fighters. The engagement required every skill she had developed during years of combat flying. As both pilots pushed their aircraft to the limits of performance, the battle took them through a series of climbing turns, dives, and high-speed pursuits that tested human endurance to the breaking point. During the height of the dogfight, Elena managed to position herself behind a German bomber formation that was approaching Soviet ground positions. Her accurate gunnery sent one bomber down in flames, then damaged another severely enough to force it to break off its attack run. Around her, other pilots from her formation were engaging multiple enemy aircraft with courage and skill that matched anything she had seen in her combat career. The air battle raged for hours, with formations of fighters and bombers from both sides entering and leaving the combat zone in waves. Elena shot down 2 more German aircraft and helped coordinate her formation's attacks against enemy bombers threatening Soviet ground forces. Her calm radio communications helped maintain order among her pilots during the most intense moments of the fighting. As the day progressed, Elena realized that the Soviet forces were holding their own against the massive German air offensive. Her formation had successfully disrupted several bombing attacks while suffering relatively light losses. The German pilots, despite their experience and superior equipment, were unable to achieve the air superiority they needed for their ground offensive to succeed. By late afternoon, the German formations began withdrawing from the battle area. Elena's fuel was running low, and several of her pilots were reporting damage to their aircraft. As her formation headed back to base, Elena counted the aircraft around her and felt relief that most of her pilots had survived the largest air battle in history. They had faced overwhelming odds and proven that skill and determination could overcome superior numbers and equipment. Elena landed her fighter as the sun was setting, exhausted but triumphant. The Battle of Kursk had marked a turning point in the war, and her leadership during the air combat had played a crucial role in Soviet success. Ground crews cheered as she climbed out of her cockpit, recognizing that they had witnessed something historic. Elena had led 100 fighters into the largest air battle in history and brought most of them home safely. Story Part 6: The Victory at Kursk transformed Elena from an exceptional pilot into a legendary figure within the Soviet Air Force. News of her leadership during the massive air battle spread quickly through military circles and eventually reached civilian populations hungry for heroes. Elena found herself uncomfortable with the attention, preferring to focus on the tactical lessons learned during the historic engagement, rather than the personal recognition that followed. Intelligence reports confirmed that the Battle of Kursk had broken the back of German air power on the Eastern Front. The Luftwaffe had lost hundreds of experienced pilots and aircraft that could never be replaced, while Soviet air strength continued to grow with new pilots and improved aircraft. Elena's successful leadership during the crucial opening hours had contributed significantly to this strategic victory that changed the entire course of the war. Elena was promoted to squadron commander and given responsibility for training the next generation of fighter pilots. She found herself working with young men and women who looked at her with a mixture of awe and determination. Inspired by her example to push beyond traditional limitations, Elena emphasized that success in combat came from preparation, teamwork, and steady nerves rather than physical strength or masculine aggression. The war continued for nearly 2 more years, during which Elena flew dozens of additional combat missions and led increasingly complex operations. She participated in the liberation of occupied Soviet territory and eventually flew escort missions for bombers attacking targets deep inside Germany itself. Each mission added to her growing reputation as one of the finest combat pilots of the war. Elena's influence extended beyond her individual achievements to the broader acceptance of women in combat roles. Her success helped convince military leaders that gender was irrelevant when it came to courage, skill, and dedication. Thousands of other women served effectively in various military positions, many inspired by Elena's example to pursue roles previously considered impossible for females. As victory in Europe approached, Elena reflected on the extraordinary journey that had taken her from rejected aviation academy applicant to one of the most respected combat pilots in the Soviet Air Force. She had flown over 300 combat missions, shot down numerous enemy aircraft, and led formations in some of the war's most important air battles. More importantly, she had helped prove that determination and skill were more important than gender when it came to serving one's country. The personal cost of Elena's wartime service was significant. She had lost many close friends during combat operations, experienced the constant stress of life-or-death situations, and sacrificed normal relationships for her military career. The physical and emotional demands of combat flying had aged her beyond her years, but she felt pride in having contributed to victory against fascism and in helping to expand opportunities for future generations of women. Elena's family had followed her career with a mixture of pride and constant worry. Her parents aged significantly during the war years, though they never complained about their daughter's dangerous chosen profession. Her brother Mikhail had also served in the military, and the family had endured the uncertainty that affected millions of Soviet families during the conflict. Their reunion after the war was emotional and profound. The end of the war in May 1945 brought mixed emotions for Elena. She felt tremendous relief that the killing was finally over, but also uncertainty about her future in peacetime. Combat flying had defined her adult life, and the transition to civilian pursuits would require the same determination she had shown throughout her military career. She wondered whether society would continue to accept women in roles they had proven capable of handling during wartime. Elena decided to remain in the Air Force after the war, helping to train new pilots and serving as an advocate for women in military aviation. Her wartime achievements had earned her respect that transcended gender barriers, and she used this influence to ensure that the gains made by women during the war would not be lost during peacetime. She became a powerful voice for equality and opportunity in the post-war military. The medals and decorations Elena received recognized her exceptional service, but she valued more highly the knowledge that she had helped change perceptions about women's capabilities. Letters from young women inspired by her example convinced her that her greatest contribution had been proving that courage and competence had nothing to do with gender. Her legacy would inspire future generations to pursue their dreams, regardless of social barriers. Elena's story became part of aviation history, studied by military academies and cited as an example of how wartime necessity could break down social prejudices. Her leadership during the Battle of Kursk was recognized as a pivotal moment that helped determine the outcome of the largest air battle in history, proving that exceptional individuals could emerge from unexpected places when given the opportunity to serve. Story. Part 7 decades after the war ended, Elena stood before a gathering of young military aviators at the same aviation academy that had once rejected her application. Now in her 70s, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had lived through extraordinary times and emerged with wisdom earned through courage and sacrifice. The audience listened intently as she shared lessons learned during a lifetime dedicated to aviation and service. Elena's post-war career had been remarkable in its own way. She had helped establish training programs that welcomed qualified candidates regardless of gender, ensuring that future generations would not face the barriers that had nearly prevented her from pursuing her dreams. Her influence on military aviation policy extended far beyond her individual achievements, helping to create institutional changes that outlasted her active service. The Soviet Union had recognized Elena's contributions with numerous honors, including Hero of the Soviet Union, their highest military decoration. International aviation organizations had also acknowledged her pioneering role in combat aviation, and her story had been featured in books and documentaries around the world. Yet Elena remained most proud of the practical changes her example had helped bring about for other women in military service. Elena had married a fellow pilot after the war, and together they had raised 2 children who pursued their own successful careers. Her daughter became an aerospace engineer, while her son served as a commercial airline pilot. Elena often remarked that her greatest victory was seeing her children grow up in a world where their career choices were limited only by their abilities and interests, not by arbitrary social restrictions. The aviation academy where Elena now spoke had changed dramatically since her youth. Female cadets trained alongside their male counterparts, and several women held senior positions within the institution. Elena looked at the young faces in the audience and saw the same determination she had felt decades earlier, but without the additional burden of having to overcome gender-based prejudices that had once seemed insurmountable. Elena's speech focused on the importance of persistence in the face of rejection and the need to prepare thoroughly for opportunities that might seem impossible. She emphasized that her success had come not from being exceptional as a woman, but from being an exceptional pilot who happened to be female. The distinction was important to her, as she wanted young people to understand that competence was what mattered most in any profession. The questions from the audience revealed how much the world had changed since Elena's youth. Young women asked about technical aspects of combat flying and career progression, rather than whether they would be accepted in military aviation. Elena realized that her generation's struggles had helped create possibilities that younger people now took for granted, which was exactly what she had hoped to achieve. Elena's legacy extended beyond aviation to broader questions about human potential and social progress. Her story demonstrated how wartime necessity had accelerated changes that might have taken decades to occur during peacetime. She had become a symbol of how individuals could challenge existing limitations when given the opportunity to prove their capabilities under the most demanding circumstances possible. As Elena concluded her presentation, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had taken her from a rejected applicant to a respected military leader, and eventually to an honored elder sharing wisdom with new generations. She had witnessed and participated in some of the most significant events of the 20th century, helping to prove that courage and competence were universal human qualities rather than masculine characteristics. The young aviators who approached Elena after her speech reminded her of herself at their age, full of dreams and determination to excel in challenging careers. She offered encouragement and practical advice, knowing that their path would be easier because of the barriers her generation had overcome. Elena felt satisfaction in knowing that her wartime service had contributed not only to military victory, but to social progress that would benefit countless future generations. Elena's story had become more than personal history. It was a testament to human resilience and the power of individuals to change the world through their actions. Her journey from rejected aviation academy applicant to leader of 100 fighters in history's largest air battle proved that extraordinary achievements were possible when determination met opportunity. She had helped write a new chapter in both aviation history and the ongoing story of human equality. The Aviation Academy named their main lecture hall in Elena's honor, ensuring that future generations of pilots would remember the woman who had refused to accept limitations. Others tried to impose on her dreams. Her portrait hung alongside other aviation pioneers, a reminder that courage comes in many forms, and that the sky truly has no limits for those willing to reach for it.